I'd like to welcome everybody to another installment of Engage with Team Daniels-Haltom. My name is Aaron Katz. I'll be the host for the town hall today, and this is the FCT/DOD version. NACA is such a diverse organization. We represent air traffic controllers across the country, aviation safety professionals contained in our Region X that do multiple lines of business. And, it's a strength, and sometimes it can be a weakness because with so many vast bargaining units, people can feel as though sometimes they get lost in the shuffle. So we wanted to make sure, Team Daniels-Haltom, that we went out of our way to, well, that's a bad way to say that. We put the effort into making sure that we touched on every corner of NACA, no matter where it lives, so that everyone had an equal chance to get to learn a little bit about Nick and Jamal. This election will be, without question, one of the most consequential that we will have participated in our careers. And it's imperative that when your ballot shows up, as it gets mailed out on June 3rd, that you know as much as you can about the names that are going to be on that ballot in front of you when you make your decision. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Nick and Jamal to not just introduce themselves as candidates, tell you a little bit about who they are as leaders and as men. I will start by saying you will see a very nice, I'll use the word regal looking picture of Nick. I think he's going to turn his camera on briefly. He is having some reception difficulty wherever he is at the moment, and he may need to turn his camera off to save the bandwidth so you can at least hear him. Nick and Jamal, the floor is yours.
Yeah, as soon as I turn the camera on, watch the signal drop. So can you hear me okay right now?
Coming in a little, yeah, coming in a little broken.
Aaron.
All right, let me start.
Yep.
I'm Jamal-Haltom. Well, let me introduce Nick because we have that level of ability and we know-how about one another. Nick is running for president, and he's out of Fort Worth Center. He started his air traffic career in the Marines back in 1998. He was out in the West Coast. He was a West Coast Marine. As he would tell you, he had a desire to do an entire career in the Marines, but was injured in service and was discharged honorably, of course, and got hired in the FAA in 2003, Addison Tower, and transitioned from there after 2 years to Fort Worth Center. Certified right before the White Book, which is, as you know, air traffic controllers, we identify our time frame by our contracts. So he certified right prior to the White Book and became an area rep. Later was a area rep, and then VP, and then president of the facility. He served 3 terms in the president capacity. Simultaneously, in the last 2 terms, he was the ARVP for the Southwest region, and then ran for and was elected as RVP in 2021. So that's his FAA and NACA experience somewhat. Obviously, he served in many capacities and projects, was part of the CRWG team that helped to cultivate the staffing numbers that we got recently passed as part of our FAA reauthorization. Personally, he does have 2 children. Boy that just graduated, Logan. Logan's 18 and just graduated, and he has a little daughter, and she is 6, a kindergartner, and pretty bossy as I've seen it, and she's in charge of him, as he would say always. Really great children. Myself, I'm Jamal-Haltom. I am running for executive vice president. I'm out of Las Vegas Tower, and I joined the agency in 2007. Previous to that, I was in the Air Force air traffic controller. I got out of the Air Force after serving from 1999 to 2005 and worked at 2 contract towers along the way. I worked at Groton Tower in Connecticut and Martin State Tower in Maryland, right outside of Baltimore. And then I got picked up in the FAA in 2007, went out to Vegas, transitioned to Tamiami Tower, came back to Vegas in the tower, and have been there since. Along the way, I've served in several capacities as well. I was a 4-term FAC rep at Las Vegas, also did a term as an alternate regional vice president. That term was somewhat truncated because I did get selected and appointed to become NACA's national training representative and transitioned to that role in 2019. So I've technically been in Washington, D.C. since then. Personal life, I too have a daughter. She's 21, and that's the only kid that I have, and that's where we are. So with this, Aaron will kick it back to us after he gives some housekeeping, but I'll get ahead of it and say this is really your time to talk to us, not so much our time to talk to us. We do want to talk to you. We do want to provide introductions, and that's why we did that, but really turning the floor over to you to not only get questions, but concerns, ideas, all things. We believe in full transparency and clarity, and the only way we can get better and recognizing and understanding your issues is by having that open dialogue. So thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Jamal, for pulling the double duty there, taking care of Nick's introduction. I know Nick's struggling with the signal right now. With that, we're going to cover some housekeeping items, and I think we're just going to jump right into the Q&A portion. First, I want to mention that the town hall is being recorded. I just wanted to let everybody know that. We do that so we can send out videos after the fact to the membership, along with the video in its entirety for anybody who maybe couldn't join us tonight. So there's a couple ways you can ask a question. The first is you can use the raise your hand function. And if you take your mouse and scroll over to the bottom of the Zoom, you'll see it just to the left of the green button that says share. So that's one way. If you raise your hand, I'll come over to you and I'll ask you to unmute. You'll get a little message that says the host is asking you to unmute, which you'll be able to do. If you're in a place where you can, don't hesitate to turn on your camera. I know that's ironic as Nick isn't able to do so, but I think he's relocating to a place that has some Wi-Fi that he can grab onto. So we'll do a little tap dance in here to give Nick a chance to improve his reception. So you turn your camera on, it increases the engagement interaction. I can see someone's already posted a question in the chat. That would be the second way you can do that. Please post it to everyone. If you do it just to one person and the chat gets full, it's hard to manage. So just do it where everyone can see it. If you are able to put your facility in there, that's great. Lets us know where you're from. And I'll say our town halls are very much about engagement, interaction, and transparency. We are not looking to lob up softballs and hammer them over the fence. Anyone can do that. You have questions, you have issues, especially this group. This is such a unique group, right? Where we get very settled into the minutia and the mechanics of the FAA side of air traffic. It's great to be able to engage with our federal contract tower brothers and sisters, or Department of Defense brothers and sisters. So please ask your questions. Don't pull punches. You've heard stuff. You want answers from Nick and Jamal. That's what they're here to do. We can all be respectful. We're still one family, dysfunctional as we may be, like many families. But a little common courtesy and respect is always appreciated. But ask whatever it is on your mind. Don't leave here without a question. Don't leave here without a question answered. So I'm going to go ahead and read the first question in the chat. I'm going to put on my old man glasses so I can get it right. And here this is from Rick Callie. We may have new people here tonight, so my question is again, are you willing to ask the AFL-CIO to take lead on our negotiations for the FCT CBAs with NACA in an advisory role?
And just to Rick, and I think you're at Fayetteville, were you looking for Nick to answer that question? You're on, so you could speak if you'd like. I feel comfortable answering it, but if you want to hear it from Nick, that's perfectly fine as well. You want to unmute him, Aaron, so he could speak?
There we go. Sorry.
Go ahead, Rick. You got to unmute yourself now, and then you could speak.
There we go.
There.
Hi. Yes, I'd like to wait for Nick because he's running for president, and I'd like his input on this officially once he arrives. So you can just put me at the back of the queue.
Sounds good. Thanks, Rick, and thanks for
Sure.
being here. It's your second call,
Rick,
so we appreciate you
30
having the
minutes now.
desire to be part of it.
Internet.
It came in a little broken, but it sounded like Nick's about 3 minutes away from where he needs to be to get the Wi-Fi. Yeah. So again, please don't hesitate to use the raise your hand function or anything in the chat, and then we will happily. I didn't mention about the mute function. We struggled there for a second with Rick. When I scroll over and click unmute or ask to unmute, you'll get a little message on your screen. You can click that. If you go back on mute and you have more to say as a follow-up, you'll need to raise your hand back up again, or I won't know to unmute you. So if you want to just stay off mute until your question is answered, that's perfectly fine. Okay, I think we've got another one in the chat. Here we go, old man glasses. Bernie Campo. I get the lack of participation from FCT controllers being interpreted as a lack of interest. For the most part, FCT controllers are way overworked, underpaid, and underrepresented. How do you plan to include the FCT world in your world as a NACA leader?
Well, first of all, Bernie, thanks. You know, I personally, and I don't think Nick either, thinks of a lack of engagement as a lack of desire to be one heard or represented. Typically, you're working with skeleton crews are only enough to operate the operation on a day-to-day basis with very little overlap. So we understand that there's reasons you can't be at conventions or local meetings sometimes. I'm sorry, regional meetings sometimes, but your voice is still heard and valued. Having spent time at a contract tower, I can tell you one of the things that we recently were able to do successfully with NACA, and partly, part of my experience as the national training rep and having spent time in FCTs was we were able to beat back the Midwest and I believe Serco's desire to have FCTs be able to hire hire people directly from CTI programs into those and not go through the 6-month training that the CFR Code of Federal Regulations currently calls for. What they were attempting to do was ultimately, in the long run, lower the pay for controllers at FCTs, which would, in the long run, eventually affect DOD and FAA controllers as well, because we're all tied together. We're able to beat that back, and while they may be able to hire from CTI programs when those enhanced CTI programs are set up, they'll still have the requirement to have 6 months of training OJT prior to doing so. So as you guys know, those companies don't have an interest in paying someone to train. They want to be bare bones minimum. So our interest will be in always looking out for the FCT controllers, because the FCT controllers help set the bar for other controllers. And quite frankly, they deserve to be treated the same way. It's a profession, and no matter where you're providing that profession, you reflect upon the profession, so you deserve to be treated as such. So yeah, we don't have any desire to go backwards, but more so go forward and strengthen our relationship with the FCT controllers and make sure that they understand that they're properly represented. Part of that will require people like you, Bernie, Rick, and others to find ways to be engaged, because not working in your buildings is, we don't always know your issues specifically or with the level of specificity that you do, but that dialogue helps us to get there. So Bernie, I see you on camera. Do you want to come off and speak to that, or provide any tips, counters, whatever it may be?
Just as you started speaking, we had a lightning strike and knocked me offline for your whole presentation. I apologize. I just literally came back on. Since, of course, once I reboot my computer, Zoom had to update at the same time. But
well, I'll try to paraphrase real quick, Bernie. What I was saying was we were able to, because of us having experience in FCTs and going backwards a little bit, we were able to push back and thwart Midwest ATC's efforts to have FCT controllers be able to be hired out at CTI programs and not have the 6 months of training that's required under the Code of Federal Regulations. They wanted to do that, and their attempt to do that in the long run was to say, look, we can turn anybody into a controller, which would then essentially lower the pay as time goes on. If you can make anybody a FCT controller, then why should I have to pay them a decent wage? We want to see that wage steadily increase, not decrease, and not selfishly, but frankly, it affects us as well. The wages for FCTs end up setting the bar. We want to see your wages go up just like we want to see our wages go up. Your facilities, we want new facilities for lots of for your antiquated, outdated facilities. We were recently in Hollywood Tower. They need a new tower for certain. The operations that they do, and what Nick and I have been very adamant about is if one were to have an accident or incident at a FCT, it's not going to say a federal contract tower controller. It's going to say an air traffic controller. You're just as much as part of the profession as we are, and we want to make sure that we impart that and that we show you that we mean it, not just with words.
So, one of the questions I do have too is we need to NACA needs to break their way into the FCT program office the same way they broke into the FAA when I became an original member back in 1988. We can't just look at it and call it a labyrinth of unknown control. We got to break into there and get stuff done from the congressional level moving on forward. The working conditions are deplorable. Time on position is ridiculous. I say on frequency, after I've been on the out position for a couple hours, I'm done with pattern working. I'm taking a 45-minute break. Nobody's doing any pattern work I'll allow arrivals and departures. I put that on frequency, and I say I'm fatigued because I've been down there for 3.5 hours, and there's no one to give us a break. That kind of stuff has to change. It has to change for the working conditions. I know we did a recent sleep fatigue study for the NATCA. You know, there's a perfect example for the FAA to contract out all controllers and save a ton of money because there is no fatigue mitigation for FCT controllers for the 256 FCT hours. And it's kind of bullshit. We really need to get in there. We need to have the president in there. We need to be to break into those offices, do what needs to be done. It's complete crap.
Yeah, I think when you say break into those offices, you mean form some relationships and
exactly.
Okay, I didn't know if you were being literal or figurative. You're talking about 1988. I don't know what was happening then, but I do know that we do need to establish lines of communication, dialogue, and not just rely on what already exists is what exists, and that's okay. From the standpoint, if you go back in history, obviously we know when we transitioned into the FCT program under the Clinton administration and what it was supposed to do versus what it does do. The municipalities that you serve have an expectation. I mean, we have commercial service in some of our FCTs driven by some of our FCT controllers. So it needs to be accounted for and identified, and having 4 people not on a shift, but 4 controllers period at a tower when I worked at Groton to operate 18 hours a day is inappropriate, and it can't stand the test of time. So we do have to be part of that process. And this campaign is set up to get information so that we can act on it. And we won't sit here and act like we already know every single thing. But people like you, Bernie, will be part of that, pushing it forward when we are elected.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I'm getting kind of old on how much longer I'll be around, but probably 3 years anyway. And I want to thank you, Nick, for not charging us for this meeting. I heard that some other candidates were getting charged for stuff, so I just want to thank you that I didn't have to give you money for the Zoom meeting.
Hey, Bernie, I've known you for too long to not laugh at that. I hope you can hear me now. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we got you good.
That is hilarious, and yes, we'll definitely make its rounds as that goes on. The one thing that we have is an amazing team behind us of over 200 volunteers and so many that have reached out. So, Bernie, I think we're covered from now until the end of this campaign to not charge you for any of this meeting or in the future. But I just want to reiterate what Jamal said, and I'm not going to repeat it. Everything that you're bringing up is absolutely a point that things only happen because labor, A, gets educated on what we can maneuver, and then B, takes action on it. And those two things have to coexist. And that's up to us as leaders to give that opportunity for it to happen. So couldn't agree with you more. that our leadership needs to be more in our FCTs. And that's been a concerted effort on Jamal and I's behalf on this campaign to go out to some of these. And, you know, one of the most unfortunate things, we're in Topeka, Kansas the other day, and we're setting up to go out there. And unfortunately, as we're going to that FCT, the only person working is a manager. I mean, that should go to show you that we didn't even have a NACA member staffing the facility at the time that we were going by to visit. And it was in the middle of the day. So I won't jump on in my soapbox from there. But Bernie, thank you for being here, and thank you for your passion for this union and for federal contract hours, especially.
Thank you for your platform today, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bernie. Okay, so Rick has his hand up. We're going to go back over to Rick. He had posted the first question in the chat, but I think he's going to ask on camera here. You should be unmuted, Rick.
Yeah, I see that now. Thanks. To Bernie's situation, he may have some Cuban plumbers down there that are getting into offices. You just don't know in Florida. Jamal, you mentioned that Serco and Midwest, each time when the microphone got working again and the lightning bolt and everything. What about RVA? We have a GNOT in our binder that says they're going to start pumping them in from these colleges. We don't have any information other than that in RVA CI2.
Yeah, so just to be quick, so you can move on to your next question. They will be permitted to hire from enhanced CTI programs, but the enhanced CTI programs will have to keep the same standard as the academy. So essentially, the academy curriculum, academy courses, pass, fail, all of those things. What they won't be able to do is work around the CFR. What they were attempting to do was get the CFR change that would then allow them to hire them, do 4 months of additional simulation at their school, and then the 60 days to get trained and live OJT. They'll still have to do 6 months of OJT because the Code of Federal Regulations says that your first time being an air traffic controller, you have to do it 6 months supervised, meaning 6 months in a training status. And we were able to maintain that. So Serco, RVA, CI squared, Midwest, none of them will be able to work around that rule. So, and in truth, they likely won't hire because they don't want to have a person up there for 6 months that they're not, quote unquote, getting anything out of. And also, while we're on it, got to make sure that all of you get OJTI pay. I know some do and some don't, and having OJTI pay is fundamental. I mean, you can't pass this art, or you shouldn't be asked to pass this art for free.
That's good to know that RVA and CI2 didn't somehow skinny past that. We're already dealing with plenty of that right now. The other thing that I was going to mention, and you said it can't stand the test of time, and that sounds good, but it has stood the test of time so far. It's been over 30 years. Things have been just like this or worse for 30 years. And to say that you're going to do something about it, I'm sure that somebody along the way over the last 30 years has said they were going to do something about it. So these other questions that I see in the chat probably are addressing things with a little bit finer of a point. And that's why I waited for you to come back, Nick. If I'll stay on if you want to ask my question again, Aaron, or whatever.
Yeah, you're good, Rick. You're here, you're unmuted. Fire away, brother.
Oh, I should do it. Well, I have to go over here because I barely remember what I did.
Oh, would you like me to read it to Nick?
Yeah, I gotta scroll up to find it.
No problem. Okay. We may have new people here tonight, so my question is again, are you willing to ask the AFL-CIO to take lead on our negotiations for the FCT CBAs with NACA in an advisory role?
I appreciate it, Rick. And I just want to make sure you can hear me okay now.
I can, yes.
Okay. Thank you all for bearing with me. I would be remiss if I didn't pause and say, Jamal, that was amazing intro. It's probably my best one to date, but delivered by Jamal. So I need to take that version and go from there. Rick, speaking specifically to that, I don't find at any point that somebody besides an air traffic controller should be tasked with bargaining for air traffic controllers. What we need to do is ensure we're well versed and that we have the proper support, we have the proper counsel, and that we're bringing in either, if it's a different level of, and I think, we've seen a great benefits from it already. Somebody like a Natalie Moffett, who we recently hired to help go out and bargain our contracts on the DOD side and the amount of experience that's being gained from there. So advocating for air traffic controllers should be our bread and butter. We also cover, many other multi-units as well. I do not think parsing that out to other unions and being in an advisory role in any way benefits us. I think what we need to do is ensure that we collectively speak and have a common goal of where we want to go, because I have not seen when we actually put either a group together, a focus panel together, or a group of like-minded individuals and said, this is what we need to accomplish, that we haven't improved or, gotten better. While it may, take some, I would say, a little bit more time or effort, I think it's absolutely something Jamal and I would invest in. But again, just to answer it very distinctly, I don't think that we need somebody besides air traffic controllers advocating for us.
Clear enough, your answer. But first of all, you're advocating for a lot of other units that are not air traffic controllers, and they're trusting you to advocate for them, the engineers, the map makers. So that doesn't really hold water either. Why do you feel like you are qualified after 30 years of having this pushed to the side, FCT, when there is a organization that you are under? We fought to have AFL-CIO. We started with, I think, MEBA, and we paid them off and then moved on. AFL-CIO has got a lot of really strong units that deal with private enterprise. And in the end, even though there is a no strike clause, just like there is in almost every private industry contract, if they go beyond it, example, you're ordered to pay people sick leave and then you just refuse to do it. We could have actually ULP struck on that if we wanted to. The DOL has proven that they could not do that to us, and yet they did it. So why not take a humble approach, back up and say, we are not really in a position to do right by these contract controllers. They are a different element. We're the only private organization within your umbrella. Hand us off, but you would stay. AFL-CIO would not be able to do it without NATCA there to tell them how air traffic controllers are unique. But we're also not completely separated from AFL-CIO, so they already know about us. I just think it's short-sighted. I don't think it would separate us from air traffic controlldom. But once again, the engineers, the map makers, wherever else, 19 units, a lot of them are not controllers, and they trust a controller.
So let's talk about that, Rick. That if it's map makers, engineers, and those, we have those persons in there when they're negotiating, because they provide their level of expertise to it, right? It's not just air traffic controllers advocating on behalf of engineers. It's a collective body that's finding the ways to ensure that their voice is heard, that their concerns are brought forward, and that ultimately we, as a union, have the proper resources to argue on their behalf. And if I haven't seen a contract be bargained yet, because we've been mired in ULPs for the RVA contract when we're talking about a private industry. However, what I've also seen is the private industry do exactly like what many of us are used to, and that's try to find ways to stonewall us out and try to find ways to hold us back. So again, I think we're equipped enough. And again, as president, I 100% believe that we can deliver the results that are needed, but we're going to need the engagement and the expertise. Until we get to the business where I can at least either see it from Jamal and I's behalf, we contemplate it and look at it. My initial thought wouldn't be hand it to somebody else and not involve our membership. It would, because they have more experience. We need to bring in that experience and either educate ourselves or rely on some level of expertise that's out there in it. Jamal's been on a contract team, but again, he hasn't been private. So do we have persons that are out there that can speak to, yes, what the private company negotiations look like? And I think we have phenomenal resources from our LR staff nationally to look at it as well. Again, I would rather see it in reverse, where we lean on the AFL-CIO to support us instead of us advising them. And while you may believe it to be short-sighted, Rick, I think ultimately with this union, if we get to a point where we can't serve, serve properly in that, then we expand outside of that. I think we've delivered, I would say, in the past, but we need to continue. It's not that we haven't hit the ceiling. We have to continue expanding from there. So that's just where my initial thoughts are. But I'm not going to be obtuse and stonewall out any help being given to us to advocate for our members.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it. Okay, we're gonna go back over to the chat, and we had Evan McGrew post a few different questions. So starting with the first one, it said, "Would you support the creation of an FCT RVP position being created for the NEB? As it currently stands, we are critically underrepresented."
So we that was interesting. That came up in our Southern Region call, and I'm not sure if it was Rick or someone else. But first and foremost, thanks, Evan, and thanks for being here. That determination is not made by the National Executive Board. So if myself and Nick are fortunate and do get the election and are elected into the position of Executive Vice President and President, we can't make that determination. That determination has to be made at our convention. And in order to do that, one would have to make a resolution, get a second. In most instances, the second means you have someone else there, and then you go and you speak before the board. I'm sorry, before the constitutional convention body, and try to move them. So I can see your question, your tag post up, and it says answer it yes or no. I'd have to know where you feel underserved, how that would change by having an RVP in order to make that determination. What I would say is I'd be willing to have dialogue with anyone about any subject, including this subject. And if you'd like to come on camera or not on camera, just talk to make us more smart on the subject, I'm willing to hear that. But as I stand here right now, that is not something that I've thought of as the creation of an RVP for the FCTs, because the FCTs are already covered by their RVPs in their respective regions. Again, increasing the dialogue, increasing the correspondence between the two might help you to a point where you don't feel like you're underrepresented.
And Evan, if you feel comfortable coming off mute, just put your hand up and I'll happily unmute you. And Rick, I noticed you still have.
I just want to add one more thing to that. Like right now, we have variant types of facilities. Our 4 through 9s are vastly different than our 10s, 11, and 12 towers. Our TRACONs are different than our en route facilities. And we have one RVP to cover all of those particular issues. So I'm not sure that an entity such as a council for the FCTs wouldn't serve very similarly to what we have for our large TRACONs, center, back rep, core 30 towers. If we had an FCT council, so that as a group you could bring up your interests or those things that are affecting you in that particular manner, so that then that would be heard by the National Executive Board, or that would be heard by our committees so that they could serve you in any capacity potentially. I think that is an avenue that we would most certainly be behind and support wholeheartedly. But as it relates to having another RVP, I don't know that the appetite for that exists. That would be, again, determined by the body at the convention.
So, and one thing that I'd like to add on that is, right, I became an RVP 2.5 years ago. Never had dealt with or addressed federal contract tower issues like Rick was speaking about, being a private company, who our counterparts were, and starting to dive in and look at that. Found a couple members immediately that thought, were great counsel in the Southwest region. But what I realized, especially in running for, president, and Jamal and I going out and spending time with so many different facilities, one of the things that our union needs to do better is prepare our leadership, right? Is when you become an RVP, if you're going, because one RVP would be then over multiple contracts as well, right? You would have RVA, CI, if CI Square ever splits out, or whatever debacle they end up trying to do there that we'll address. Midwest and Serco, there's 3 different worlds that we'd be operating in anyways, likened to what Jamal was just saying a minute ago. However, we simply need to take the time to ensure that RVP and ARVP, and then others that are helping the Southwest region, we created 2 LR leads with Sean Forsberg out of Santa Fe, New Mexico, Zach Rowland out of Denton, Texas, because we found that their level of expertise helped us in the world of handling labor relations issues. But John Bratcher and I needed to be well versed in not just handing it off, because I think that's what had happened in the past is, well, we just got an ARVP that's from an RVA facility and they got it. Call them. How am I supposed to advocate on behalf of you if I don't make myself the expert first? And I think that's what we need to start taking the time to do, is bringing those leaders in and saying, okay, you're now covering, just like I did at Fort Worth Center. I would cover people under the slave book, and I also covered people under the purple book. I had to take the time to learn what the purple book was. And once I had a level of understanding, I knew I could provide the proper representation. We're not doing that for our RVPs and ARVPs currently, and would love to work with this group to ensure anyone elected in any of your regions has that ability to be able to not only be able to speak to your issues, be well versed in them, but know your rights as well when it comes to private industry. That's something that we, Jamal and I, can absolutely invest and look into and doing in the future. So it shouldn't just be dive in and hopefully we figure it out. I think that is where a lot of the consternation and confusion lies and exists today, is the lack of communication and understanding.
Thanks for the first question. Evan, we'll go on to your second one because I think it piggybacks on a couple of things that Nick was just saying. What are some actual tangible ideas that your team currently has for the FCT program?
Well, I think you just heard one right there as far as that goes. So Jamal, you want to hit in a couple different lanes. I'll hit pay real quick, and then we'll see if there's anything from there. We'll move on in that regard. In the world of pay, I think Jamal has said it and has said it well. There should be a standard. First of all, the way that they pay in the private companies, where you have a facility that can be running a much lower traffic volume than somebody else, but because of when they were organized or when they were bargained, they're paid differently. And then somebody who's been there for 20 years is paid the same as somebody who got hired yesterday. That has to evolve. We need to address that and start building what an actual world of pay looks like. Because people shouldn't be treating FCTs like it's just a bus stop. It is for some people. It is a movement in their career path, but this is an actual career for many people. And there should be a progress in that career, not just I guess we'll wait until there's another negotiation or something moves us from here. And there should be a standardization of pay for air traffic control, a base pay, and we don't get paid below this. And start raising at least the floor for everyone, and then work on the ceiling from there. So Jamal, I'm sorry if I stole your point, because I hear you speak to that often. We'll keep going from there.
Okay, I believe in wholeheartedly that air traffic control as a profession, in order to keep up with the economy, needs incentives. And so having an air traffic control incentive that would be one negotiated on the behalf of the FAA controllers from the standpoint of NACA doing that, and then also negotiating and having the government pick up the tab for that, and then having the same incentive, equal type incentive for FCT controllers, and negotiate that or have that be picked up by the individual companies that you work for, be it Serco, Midwest, or RVA, CI Square, whichever one it is, having a controller incentive on top of our pay. Having you all have the same premiums and differentials that we have, as we spoke to, having OJTI premiums for you all are tangible things that we think could be done differently. One of the things that we would do is actually come out and visit the facilities. Come and visit where you are so we can get more information. Myself and Nick spend a tremendous amount of time in Arizona, and the name escapes me right now, Mesa Gateway with a wonderful FAC rep, Josh Morrison. And he taught us so much about it, what Nick just spoke to, and having the difference of having other page in the same town working half the traffic, getting paid the same. Having incentives for those very busy facilities on top of that general controller incentive. So we do have ideas that are specific and germane to the FCTs, but a lot of it is incorporating what we get for ourselves to be cover the FCTs and then fill in the gaps where they exist as well.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, ironically, Evan's third question was very much that. He wanted to know if you guys felt that FCT controllers were paid fairly, and I think you tackled that. So
Just make sure Evan has a direct answer, because somehow Jamal and I like to get things spun on the great interwebs later on. No, we don't think you're paid fairly. And one of the things that we'll never do, like Mick Devine decides to do, is to decide to have our NACA members attack each other on their pay, of saying we'll compete against each other of who gets paid more. That's wildly inappropriate, and no, you don't get paid fairly. And we have to find ways to continue elevating that and moving it forward.
Awesome. Yeah, the chat's busy tonight. It's been a good one to have to keep up with. So let's go. Okay, so we have one from John Bonner, Papa Mike Papa FCT. What role should NACA take on advising the DOL during the review of SCT wages and wage determination outlined in Section 611, Federal Contract Tower Wage Determinations and Positions?
I don't know if I'm exactly well versed in the section that's going on wage determination in exactly where you're reading from or what you're putting up, Aaron. I know one of the things that we have going on with the DOL. So whoever's asking, if you can help me understand what the basis of the question is. We're not talking about in the world of what we've been fighting with the sick leave. And I think, Mr. Bradford's done an amazing job of helping bring that subject to light and bring it forward. Is not the sick leave issue. Is it a different one?
I think, Nick, the DOL wage determination is how they set what the minimum is for an air traffic controller to be paid. I think Hakeem Jeffrey spoke about it when he came to NACA in Washington, and having that wage set at a wage that's appropriate and respectful to the profession that we do. So absolutely, what should NACA's role be? It should be in using our legislative arm to reach into every place that we can as it relates to increasing the pay for FCTs and setting the bar high enough that no matter where you are working in a federal contract tower, that the wage is commensurate to the work that we do. So do we, as it relates to the actual chapter and verse that you spelled out, Mr. Bonner, I've not read that, but I do know that we have a responsibility to use our legislative strength to address matters such as that. And I see you on camera now, so if you want to speak to it. And PMP's Pompano, right?
Pompano Beach, correct.
I know more identifiers than Nick.
The question was from the FAA Reauthorization Act that just passed, and what role NACA takes or should take, and what leadership direction you guys are going to have NACA take in helping the Department of Labor reassess our wages and how those wages are determined. Because we're still working under a wage determination that is garbage, basically.
Yeah, I worked at
that nobody really knows.
When I worked at Groton, Connecticut back in 2005, that wage determination was pretty much everything, because at least I knew that's how much I would be paid. As I go further into my career, I look at that and say it was criminal that I was paid that much, because the responsibility wasn't much different, if at all, and sometimes was higher because I'm there all by myself. So yeah, we need to use our legislative strength to lobby, to talk to those in the know who have the control over that wage determination, to say it's not serving air traffic controllers. And oh, by the way, when you want to recruit and retain, it's certainly not helping your FCTs if people can't live on the money that's there. I think there's this thought that the FCTs, as Nick said, is just a stopping ground on your way to the FAA or after your FAA career. We've met in our encounters people at Johnson County in Tennessee, up in when we were in New England. We met a controller who has worked in FCTs for 20 plus years. That person deserves to be able to take care of their family on the wage because they're providing to a municipality, no different than I am at Las Vegas Tower. So absolutely, we have to be part of that process, and the way is through our legislative outreach.
Fair enough.
Thanks for coming off mute, John, for the clarity. Appreciate that.
Outstanding.
I'm going to take one more from the chat, and then we'll go over to Rick, who's had his hand up. Joey Zobel says, I have friends who contact me from different DOD facilities inquiring how to join NACA, but the process is complicated and delicate. Could there be any national initiative to acquire all DOD controllers under NACA similar to the FAA or the companies that employ contract tower controllers?
Here's one of the beauties of who Jamal and I are, and the team that we plan on being a part of, is your national organizing chair, John Bratcher, may or may not be listening. He's probably holding his son right now and waiting for my call back that I told him I would do earlier. So there he is. And this is, again, how we operate as a union. Jamal and I don't have to have all the answers, but we can work, and John's here to listen to you as well as the national organizing chair. He's going to be the next RVP of the Southwest region. He is already an RVP elect. So if John, make sure, and if you want to walk through some of the efforts, and are we on a path to organize all the DODs, and if not, what would it look like in supporting you to make that happen as president and executive vice president?
Somebody's got to unmute Brad.
He is.
Can you hear me?
Then
Can you hear me now?
We hear you, Brad.
Sure.
Thanks, brother, for the opportunity. Yes, we have, in fact, organized several DOD. I'd say several. We've organized a few DOD facilities. We're in the process of organizing other DOD facilities. The problem comes into twofold. When you organize a DOD facility that's unrepresented by anyone, you have to negotiate a contract for that particular DOD facility in itself, and it takes resources. And so if we were to organize 15 DOD facilities, that's 15 individual contracts. So there are some scenarios where we have to pace ourselves. We haven't necessarily found ourselves in that boat, but it is a concern because there's different branches, different. You don't just negotiate like DOD wide. You would negotiate you could potentially get a master agreement for multiple branches, like all Air Force ones, all Marine locations. The thing about that normally is the way the DOD works is they consider the base its own unit. So you would have to negotiate per base. The problem we fall into on a lot of occasions, at least once a week, I probably get an email from some DOD facility or a controller that used to work in a DOD facility that wants to organize. And unfortunately, in most cases, they are part of what's called a base-wide unit, where it's the American Federation of Government Employees, AFG, or NEFI, or one of the other unions already have a base-wide unit. There is a process, and we have to follow through the AFL-CIO, which is basically convincing a union like AFG to give up its rights to a group of employees, being air traffic controllers. We had, I think, if I remember correctly, 3 bases that were done under the president at the time, J. David Cox, and our former president, Paul Rinaldi, had worked out a scenario to get those. But in most cases, they've been opposed as a union giving up those. So it would be something that our new president and executive vice president would have to make the board would make a decision to pursue, trying to work out a deal with AFG, NEFI, something like that. And then once we did that, we'd also have to develop resources or dedicate resources to negotiate individual contracts for every base that we went to.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that, brother. And like you said, obviously nuanced, but we can continue to get that education out there, especially since many of y'all are reached out to or other, union reps around the country. Like somebody is going to reach out and say, hey, how do I join NACA? It should be a much easier resource. And this is something that we're just kind of parlay and talk to momentarily about for our representatives. And I don't care what you're in the world of representing, right? It could be FCT, FAA, any of our other lines of business, staff support, TMC, DOD, keep going on and on. What our union should have is access to information that isn't go now search on the website, try to find a committee, try to look up John Bratcher's information and say, here, contact this guy. Because likely it's a brand new fact rep that's being asked, or it's just a member at large. What every rep in the country should have is, I need to contact our organizing rep. organizing representative. You're asking a question about organizing? Here you go. On this app, I know if I click this, it goes out and it emails all the appropriate persons. Hey, there's somebody interested in this. Would you please contact them? And then we follow up and we move from there. It's starting to get out of the ways of, you got it somehow in this large of an organization with 15,200 members that everybody has to know somebody. No, we should just make it accessible. And that's something that Jamal and I look forward to bringing our flavor as well. John Bratcher and I have actually executed that in the Southwest region with the FAA FAC reps and VPs. We're looking to move that over to the FCT reps and building that, and then eventually rolling it out to the members as well. So that way we open up our communication and at least our resource list in a much more, I would say, accessible manner. So just figured I'd take that opportunity to knock that one out there as well.
Thanks, Nick. Bratch, you still had your hand up. I'll click on unmute just in case, or you can lower your hand. Okay. I'm going to invite Rick, or welcome Rick back to the discussion. Go ahead, Rick. You should be able to unmute. There you go.
And I did. With the understanding that even the slowest contract tower needs a new look, a fresh look at their pay scale and all the things that you mentioned, Nick. There are some things you just can't buy with more money to an individual. The safety issue of some of these facilities with the amount of people that are doing the amount of work is like something from PATCO demands or post or pre-NATCA days after the strike. It's bizarre how safety is being compromised, and you just can't twist it to mean anything else. We're either going to need, through this FAA reauthorization, probably our best chance of pumping more people into those facilities that probably should have been taken back into the FAA, or bringing them back into the FAA. You can't just pay the individuals that are there already money and believe that you've completely resolved this situation. What's your viewpoint on that? And then I have to go to a date with my wife.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, one thing really quick, Rick, is I think I said it, and if I didn't, I'm remiss, is when we did talk to Josh, that was one of the big things. One of the busiest, more high-profile FCTs in the country, Williams Gateway, and they have 6 controllers. They're supposed to have 10. It doesn't appear that their employer actually has an interest in having 10 because 6 works for them. So one is just forcing them to hold the line to where they say they're the amount of employees they're supposed to have. But again, as I said, I worked at Martin, I worked at Groton, and 4 controllers and a manager was all that we had. That's simply not enough. It's not enough to allow you to take vacation. It's not enough when it gets busy. I remember working extremely hard in Groton, trying to overcome a New England accent. And when the other controller went home, I'm all by myself in a foreign place that I've only worked at for 45 days. And I thought to myself, wholly inappropriate that the government, because it is still a government contract, that the government allows this to take place. So that's what we're asking you, is to allow us to get in position to speak that into the ethos, to let the public know what's happening, to put a different face on it and a different spin and call attention to it, because we don't think that just money is enough. The staffing has to increase.
Well said, Rick. And very well said. I completely agree with, as Jamal put it right there. And go enjoy that date. Don't get in trouble. You can watch this again later on, Rick.
Thanks, Rick. Okay, let's go back to the chat. And this was something from a little bit earlier. It was when Jamal was saying that FCTs are being represented by current RVPs. William from MQY, not sure where that is. Yes, but the Southern Region RVP previously in Marinetti ignored major issues within the South for FCTs. Is it the NDJH goal to have Jim on their national staff?
Yeah, I'll jump on that. No, I don't know who Jim applying for. He's never mentioned or said. He has helped us on this campaign. Been an advocate and seeker of truth. Representative is exactly what that term is. Representative or advocate, right? You can put both of those in. The level of service is up to you through elections and also through being able to voice your concerns up the chain. NACA keeps a very small chain. And like you said, I think, in looking at it, William and I've had several conversations about this. Is the lack of communication that we've had in the past is one of our barriers that we have to break down. He sent me many ideas. He sent me different, questions to look up. He's been very invested in, issues surrounding FCT facilities. But now we have to take that information and learn and grow from it, and then ultimately share it with others to go from there. So again, I wanted to answer the first part of the question of is Jim vying for a job or going to be part of his staff? No, as in he has not applied for anything or ever mentioned that from there. But we will continue ensuring that. I think one of the things that you're concerned about is, listen, people are going to say that Nick Daniels didn't provide a level of service that's out there. What can we ultimately look back and stand on and saying was done? And I can tell you right now, we're missing in the world of FCTs and the level of education that's being brought to our RVPs, ARVPs, and other leaders. These discussions aren't happening because it's a 1 to 2 person facility. And luckily, we have people out there like Bob Moore in the Southwest region, who I have a relationship with. We both worked at Fort Worth Center together, who's letting us know what's going on. And we're not just sitting there with our hands tied. Getting things through RVA and CI squared and actually addressing these issues are very difficult. But at least Bob knows these are being dealt with and addressed. We can talk about it, and we hold a monthly telcon to do that very thing. It's very informal. We have the conversation exactly like we do here, and it's up to us to help set that stage and that expectation of our RVPs that if there's a level or lack of representation being provided, or what feels it to be a job not being well done, that we look into it and help find ways to assist with it. No, it's not going to be a goal of make everyone happy. Anyone that's a leader on here knows they'll never make everyone happy. It's a leader of, can we look at ourselves in the mirror at the end of the day and say that we're doing the right things for the right reasons and providing the time, the opportunity, the resources to ensure you have that representation.
Yeah, and I would only add to that, we went to Norwood up in Connecticut. We went to Fullerton in California, again, Martin, to talk to and usually it's one person. We talked to one person max. I think at Norwood we had 2 controllers up there at the same time, so that was pretty good. Johnson County, we had a couple controllers at the same time, so that worked out well. But going to the point of communication is a two-way street. So we have to find a way to get our FCT controllers. As I opened it up, I know it's difficult with the staffing, but how can we communicate? What are the means and methods that you want to be communicated with? Is it email blast? Is it TikTok? Is it Instagram? What way do you want to be communicated with so we can be most effective? Because I believe Jim to be a person that attempts to communicate, and if those communications failed, then we have to figure out how to be more effective at that. Because I do get the feeling that, you guys think, well, perhaps they're paying lip service. We don't want to do that. We actually want to be effective and do a job well because we believe in labor. You're providing labor. We want to serve you well, but we can't do it if we don't communicate with one another. So if anyone has any ideas, please put it in the chat, ways you think it can be communicated with, ways that are working now, or some failures that have occurred that will be helpful to us going forward.
And the chat's still full, so we're going to break it up and we're going to go over to Bill Allen. Welcome him. Bill, go ahead, brother. Should be able to unmute. There you go.
All right, can y'all hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Bill.
All right, can you see me?
No.
You cannot.
Okay, I don't know why the camera's not working. But my question is, if you're elected, what are you going to do to improve the outcome for FCT? Because right now I'm looking through all the NEB meeting notes for this year. There's not one single mention of any FCT issues in the notes, and specifically the southern region.
Yep.
And you brought up Jim Manarini. That was the last time we had a conference call, a voice call, or anything. We've pretty much not heard anything out of the southern region since he left. And it's just been radio silence ever since. I mean, we hear from Bernie, but that's about it. And our members feel like they're not being represented by anyone. We have to go to the Department of Labor to get our issues heard because the union's not picking up the bill on that. So my question is, what do y'all propose to change that?
Yeah, Bill, there's a couple things there. Will you mention the first part where you just saying, I wanted to make sure I captured it. Was the very first part of your question again? What was it?
I'm just wanting to know how you guys plan to represent the FCT controllers if you're elected.
Okay.
And what changes you're going to bring to how we're going to be represented and actually heard.
No problem at all, Bill. First, again, thanks for being here. I think this is the highest turnout I've ever seen for any of the FCTs. The Southwest region, we've got starting to get a little bit more traction. We have 8 or 10. I'm going to give you some examples first of what things that we've done in the Southwest region and where I think that we can build on for Jamal and I. One is just having times like this. We should have time for our different units to talk with their national leadership. Number two is we should have an expectation of our RVPs, if you haven't heard from them, is stating Jamal and I should say, okay, we need to know what's going on with your FCTs. Give us your 5 that are working. We all have issues, right? Give us 5 of the common issues that we can either start working on, or 5 of the facilities that we need help removing impediments from, so that way they can progress forward with whether it's a procedure, whether it's staffing, or whatever that is. The other thing is, Bill, just so you're aware, I feel the same pain that you do in the Southwest region. Is we have to put everything on an agenda item to speak about it. Leaders have to go out and actually look and ask questions of others of what's going on. Everybody can fill up their day and tasks with a million things. There's 1,000 emails that come in. There's all sorts of personnel issues, facility issues, but it takes a leader to focus and set expectations for it. And that's what Jamal and I would do different. I've never been asked about the Southwest region in 2.5 years. I could bring it up. I could talk about it, I guess, in an NEB meeting, but we should have leadership that says, okay, what is happening in the Southwest region, to include FAA, FCT, and then TMCs and staff support specialists, because then you would have Region X RVP cover the multi-units and going from there, to include those RVPs that have the DOD facilities as well. It's going to take a concerted effort from Jamal and I to ask about it, and then it will focus and bring the attention to it. So, Bill, that you shouldn't have those times and opportunities where nothing's been had, or if we find out about them, we say, let's make a plan. Because our job's not, we shouldn't micromanage the regional vice presidents, but what we should do is provide opportunity and support to do the very thing that you're asking. How can we have better communication? Well, let's, like Jamal said earlier, feel free to bring us ideas. What works best for you? Because we can put out all the, like you said, NEB meeting minutes or NACA news updates, but that ultimately doesn't address your concerns, and that doesn't bring forward the conversation that needs to be had. So this is our style. You're seeing it now. It's something that we plan to continue with from there. And Jamal, I'll turn it over to you if there's anything you want to.
Yeah, Bill, I would share your frustration with the NEB minutes, and I would tell you that I would recommend to you that you use the Constitution to your strength. And the Constitution does allow for you to get on the agenda of the NEB when they have a meeting, and it gives you 5 minutes. That's all. But you can expound that time if there's no one else, and with a second and approval from someone else. But it is an opportunity to get your foot in the door to have your issues heard with the National Executive Board. What I've been around for executive boards since about 2012 is my first exposure to the National Executive Board. They used to meet for at least 2 days and sometimes 3 full days. I watch an executive board that's led and with an attempt to shorten the meeting as much as humanly possible and have almost no issues heard. I think that that's derelict, and I don't think that it leads us to the strength that we need as a union. Your issues can come up. They need to come up in the meetings that exist, and we need to create an avenue for that. So if not an RVP or someone speaking on your behalf, having the opportunity to do that very thing on your own should be something that occurs. So look there in the Constitution, and if you want to offline, I can show you exactly where it is so that you could utilize that provision.
Yeah, and William left a comment in there as you guys were speaking about the minutes, just so we capture coming out of the town hall that in the last 28 NEB meetings mentioned FCT issues one time. So concerns are definitely heard, William. Okay, so Bernie posted in the chat. It's a little more of a commentary, but I think it does provide some speaking points there. Many FCT facilities are much busier than FAA facilities. We need NACA to push for FCT issues. We need the NACA legislative team to include FCT issues for NACA in Washington. I don't know if you guys wanted to touch on that.
Well, I'll let Nick touch it, but I do want Bernie to know that we can see him jumping around whenever it thunders. So Bernie, thunder can't hurt you. It can't hurt you. Can't do. Go ahead, Nick, though, if you want to address that one.
I'm sorry, you made me laugh there, Jamal. And it got really loud out here. When you said thunder, I couldn't hear it because a car came screaming by. So if you have it, go ahead. But by all means, I'll jump in behind you.
Yeah. So I believe the question is, how are we going to advocate for the FCTs? Is that the general gist of your question, Bernie? Yeah, there you go. Unkey the mic.
There you go.
Yeah, I did have a shit scared me a second ago. That lightning bolt was close.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. But go ahead.
I'm a puss. I can't help it. Yeah, it scared the shit out of me. I reached out to the legislative team a couple years ago and asked to be the representative at the time, the chair. I don't remember who it was, to reach out, and then he shortly thereafter left, and a new person came in. But I really would like to see those issues brought up, because one of the things that help FCTs move forward is congressional involvement. The only time we get congressional involvement at Page Field is when a business is hampered by, we're so busy that they didn't get out to go do touch and goes, that we're running 1,100 operations with 4 controllers, and they complain to their congressional representative, and then he writes a letter to the local news on what a poor job we're doing. And then the FAA comes by and says we're doing a spectacular job in their last FAA, but they don't mention our time on position or anything like that, or fatigue. And so we definitely need to get involved, almost to the point of the way Region X got involved when they started in NAB.
Yeah. So when I just spoke to that was earlier, speaking to how to get the DOL the wage accounted for and raised. It's the same thing. Legislative is part of as big a part of or component of how we move the ball as anything else is, and sometimes the biggest. Labor relations is just how you sign MOUs. It's how you sign collective bargaining agreements and work out grievances. But monumental changes are done through legislation. So absolutely, we should have our legislative strength behind the FCTs. I'll be frank and say that our legislative committee, I can't speak for them because they're not here, but I think they feel they've been underutilized, that they haven't been able to shine in the way that they have in the past. And maybe this is one of those places where they'll have an opportunity to go out and lead the path for the FCT. So by no means will we be keeping the FCTs off of the legislative agenda. In fact, running toward it is just the opposite of that.
And the part that I'll add, that still comes back to, I think, what some of the fundamental issues that we're having from the very go right now is it takes leaders speaking about these, and as Jamal said, into the ethos. We have to go out there and say there are issues in our FCT program. And once we start saying that, and as a union, people will start paying attention. But when it's never addressed and never brought up from the very beginning, it's just, yeah, we know it exists, but who's really now taking it serious? So that's another portion of this. And yes, legislatively, we should absolutely have a presence. It was great to see, Bernie, you at NACA in Washington. Josh, that's where we met Josh Morris, and then went to Mesa Gateway from there. Is we understand that having your ability to get out of the facility is extremely difficult. The very finite leave that you have, extremely difficult. And then, there's certain provisions where in like RVA, you could use your dues to reimburse yourself for going, but we need to ensure that we find, if we can't get you there, is the ways to bring it to all of you. And it seems like it's going to be through means and methods like this until we start getting everyone's collective knowledge brought to up to par, and what Jamal and I believe can be done with the next NEB.
So I posted the FAA memo again because a lot of people don't even realize this memo exists. It's how about the FAA has determined that no FCT facility, irrespective of how busy they are, will get a star system. And can you imagine if they said that to an FAA facility? So the memo's posted in there for you guys to have. It recently came up again when I had F11 call me about Leesburg getting a stars, and he was shocked to find out that the FAA would not do that as well. They're looking at ulterior stuff. I'm sure it has to do with ADS-B, pads, iPads or something like that. But that memo is eye-opening.
Yeah.
When you say stars, do you mean a tower, a TDW?
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're saying they're not adding them because some of them currently have them.
Yeah, there's no additional ones being added. That memo that's on the link right there will tell you that that came out of an ERC report. We've been trying to get Destin a certified tower display for 3 years. They've had near mid-airs because their service is provided by the Navy, and the Navy does a horrible job. IFR aircraft will show up on a right base, half-mile away from an IFR aircraft on final. Seriously, in IMC conditions. Happens all the time. We filed near mid-airs. We filed all these reports. We filed an ACE. It's an ATSAP for the FAA. An ATSAP program. The word has escaped me, but that we use to determine what they need. And then the FAA came out that menu said, "Sorry, you ain't getting one." That memo. I mean, you're just not going to get it, even though we determined an exclusive need for one.
So yeah, we'll have the team pull that memo down so we can take a look at it, Bernie. And
sure.
Yeah, that seems like something that, as you said, through legislative and sometimes using the media to our benefit to say that dog don't hunt. We got to do something better than that, for sure.
Yeah, I'll tell you something ironic. I was on the legislative team that stopped the second round of contracting towers.
Well, there it is. Then we don't need to hire anyone from the AFL-CIO. We got Bernie.
No, we did that through congressional. Did that through Stevens stopped it.
Most of our big wins are legislative, for sure.
And one of the things that I want to address real quick there is something that I think we need to start talking about as an organization. I know technically this is questions for Jamal and I, but we obviously going to breathe positivity into this, that we will be successful and that we will win. But one of the things that I think we need to talk about in the FCT world that we've talked about in the Southwest region, and while we have the others that are here, is it does take members stepping up, just like William Russell's done, just like Bernie's done, just like Sean Forsberg's done, Zach Rowland, Bob Moore. The list can go on. And those are the ones who have just reached out to us for our DOD sides. Seeing so many people that take up, that, hey, this is mine. This is ours. Okay, now we need to fight for it and own it and not wait for somebody else to do it. Those are great things, but we need to be able to learn the lessons from it. And that's where I get back to about leaders learning and speaking about it to others. We're a member-led organization. We're a volunteer army. We shouldn't be the ones that are standing out there saying, man, is Big NACA or NACA National going to do something for us? If a member's leading the way, let's find ways to help them. And then don't stand in the way of the expertise. Provide assistance, champion the cause, but we need to have a better communication of those things occurring. So we don't find out, 2 years, like as a regional vice president, oh man, William Russell's been out there fighting this with the DOL, and I had no idea. Now I'm trying to play catch up, and let's move from there. So a better level of, I would say, updates, communication, and ultimately realizing we do need to empower each other. And it is okay for our members to lead the charge. We just need to be willing to back them up if it's appropriate and it's the direction this union is going to be moving in.
Thanks, Bernie. Let's go back to the chat, and then we'll hit Bill Allen, who's got his hand up. William says, does NDJH have a plan to make the insurance and other benefits more affordable within FCTs? Current health insurance with RVA for family is around $3,000 a month. And he has a quote, a reply underneath that says, our health and welfare monthly payment is $800, which doesn't even cover single coverage insurance through RVA.
Nick, you want to take it or you want me to?
The answer is simple. Yes, that's part of compensation, the packages for it. And we do absolutely need to address it. When we went out, that was one of, Sean's, again, educating me when we went out to Santa Fe of what RVA is doing to them and how it's bleeding them out. There has to be a look at that. And we need to just simply pull down the financials and put a group of members together saying, what is it actually costing? What are the options of what are out there? And either start working to, show other members there are other options, or actually hold the company, like you said, to task and saying that's not going to be acceptable for those that we represent.
I would also add that maybe using our benefits and organizations to look to see if there are some other insurance entities that could maybe cover us as a conglomerate and maybe lower the wage in that regard if we had all of our FCTs going in one direction while the company contributes, then allowing you to go out and shop for that insurance, not necessarily through the company, but maybe through a company that we found through benefits. One thing we don't want to do in these calls is make empty promises or act like we have unlimited coffers, but we won't just capitulate in situations and roll over and say that we haven't at least tried. We're going to fight our hardest and figure those things out. And you'll be able to trace back an effort on our behalf for anything that we say we're going to do, that we at least attempted to do that.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks, William. Okay, let's go over to Bill Allen again. Go ahead, Bill.
All right, my question goes back to equipment facilities with the equipment they need to actually do their job. I know y'all touched on like the radar displays for a little bit, but there's a lot of towers that are doing a high number of operations. They don't even have FIDOs in their towers, and we're doing like old school ATC call and approach and hand copying our clearances down for every single clearance. And I just want to know if y'all have a plan to address equipment issues for FCT towers.
Well, one thing, Bill, can I ask you a question before you go off mute or mute yourself? Is OAJ is not an identifier I'm familiar with. Where is that?
We're right next to New River Air Station in North Carolina, about 10 miles away. We fall under Wilmington approach.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, sir. Your question is, do we have a desire to improve the equipment or have the equipment looked at? I would be being dishonest with you if specifically I said I've known that to be an issue and I have already formulated a response to that. What I will say is that you bringing that up is a concern worth looking at and ensuring that we do address it. And that's part of what we're about, is not lying to you and pretending that we have every single answer, but that we genuinely care and empathize with the issue. That's a disservice to you all, and it's a disservice to the public. Heads down time is something that you can't have. Having to write down a clearance takes your eyes off the window, or takes your eyes away from where they should be, which is out the window. So we can make a case for those type of things. We just have to know that they exist. So you have our word that we will pursue any avenue we can to get equipment up to the standard, while also being very clear that the FAA has substandard equipment for us in FAA towers. We still have people working on IDS-4s, systems from the 80s, DOS equipment. Our flight service stations have equipment where they have to put tinfoil on it in order for it to work. So there is no palace that any of us live in, but it's to live in the relative squalor as it relates to equipment is something that we can't just turn a blind eye to. So yes, Bill, we will address or look into addressing those issues as well.
And Bill, I'll add to it. It's actually our charge. It's in the Constitution. under safety, technology, and equipment. The Constitution passed by the membership to be the guiding light for the NEB and the president, the entire National Executive Board is PSG-1 under radar displays, specifically the radar displays, is that NACA will continue its efforts to ensure the air traffic facilities have the necessary equipment and procedures to maintain the world's busiest and most complex airspace system. The efforts include the advocacy of modern, efficient, reliable communication, navigation, and surveillance systems, as well as training and procedures that ensure safety and efficiency. Those are words directly from our Constitution and something that we have to uphold. So not only is it, like Jamal said, something we need to look into, we need to ensure that this Constitution is followed and that it's not just an FAA or somebody else, an FCT and DODs are left alone. As you heard in those words, there wasn't a separator in there. And we need to get back to making sure it's a union for all and in addressing it in that regard.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Bill. And I think Brad Wilco, our national pilot outreach rep, had something to add there on your question. Go ahead, Brad.
How you doing, guys? Bill, great question. I just wanted to give my perspective. I'm a controller at SoCal Tracon, specifically in the LA departures area. And one of our contract towers, Hawthorne Tower, is there. And from our perspective, I wish all of you had FIDO and were able to get your clearances, because the reality that we see from our side, and I will tell you that everybody we deal with from Hawthorne Tower, they're great individuals. We love working with them. But with the staffing issues we have specifically and having to keep flight data open solely to be able to have someone there to relay clearances to you, I think it also adds a burden on us as well as yourselves, because then you're also adding the safety risk of, it's like the telephone game. I read the clearance to you, and then you're reading it to a pilot, and is there something got missed or somebody, and we've seen issues where instead of being on a departure procedure or whatever else, the aircraft are turning. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with our airspace. Hawthorne Tower is literally 2.85 miles from LAX south. So if these aircraft don't turn on that procedure, it's an instant operational error for us and a safety issue, and they have to send the LA arrival on a go around. So I just wanted to tag on to you, Bill. I appreciate the question from you, and just wanted to say, me personally, from the FAA side as a controller at SoCal Tracon, I would fully support that, because, like I said, the Hawthorne controllers contract tower are some of the best we work with, great individuals, and I think that as much as you guys needing the support, we would appreciate the same thing on our end.
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate that. Jamal mentioned earlier that it isn't always just questions that we want from the engagement. We will welcome ideas that we can carry forward when the journey is successful. And I just wanted to read a couple that people were posting in there. Bernie had mentioned an improved national onboarding program that would help. They have reps that don't know what constitutes a wine garden meeting. I can stop there. Nick or Jamal.
Yeah, actually, I'm so glad that Bernie mentioned that. It is actually something that we are asked our onboarding representative in the Southwest region to start looking into and working with a few of our FCT reps, and then hopefully build that out and take it to the national committee. Could not agree more, Bernie. That has to be the first step in this evolution.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick and Bernie. And then Mike H. from DHN. Again, I'm not totally sure what that is. I don't want him to speak. He says two things. All FCTs need at least one more person and an answering service for the phone. He says he can't tell us how many times he's by himself and busy and the phone keeps ringing with a spam call.
I've actually heard this issue in many different facilities. That this is which facility was that one, Aaron? So that way I can just keep it in the back of the mind and arguing it later.
DHN.
Okay.
Mike, if I unmute you, brother, can you just let us know what that actual facility is? There we go. Oh, we had it and then we lost it. There we go. There's Mike.
Yeah, it's Dothan, Alabama, next to Fort Rucker, the home of RV Aviation, and we have about 400,000 movements in the local airspace. Dothan does about 90,000 of that.
Excellent.
Well, thanks for the service you're providing. And hey, was it just a statement or a question reference to phone service?
I took it as offering an idea for us.
Can you say the idea again, please, Aaron? What did he say?
Yeah, he says an answering service for the phone. He can't tell us how many times he's by himself and busy, and the phone keeps ringing, and it turns out to be a spam call.
Oh, yeah, that would obviously be a distraction, and again, having that experience of working in a contract tower, the amount of balls that you're asked to keep in the air, I don't think that one could really understand that, and it kind of goes into the question that Zobel asked about the FCTs. I'm sorry, not about the FCTs, but he dovetailed into the DOD, and will we be willing to look at the pay and address that? Is we have to look at everything. The saying that a high tide rises all ships is very true. We look at air traffic control pay, and we're not divisive in that. We don't want to, as Nick said, pit the DOD versus the FCT versus the lower level FAA tower or higher level for that matter. We think the entire profession needs an increase in compensation. So there's no element of it that we say, well, they're already taken care of. That includes flight service. We think that they need their pay increase. Our NOTAMs reps, they need their pay increase. So absolutely, all things, and I think some people have again stated, because I can read the questions, is well, some of this we've been provided lip service before. Well, I can tell you that I have a keen eye for research, as does Nick, and problem solving. Until a problem solved, I don't want to put it down. That doesn't mean I have to solve all of them. I at least have to know someone's working toward it. And that's what we'll be about. We'll be rabid in our attempt to complete missions. And once you start one, either you have someone that's spearheading and going to take it to the end, or you have to take it to the end. And that's what building teams actually does. And that's what we're seeing that's hurting our union now, is a contraction and a coalescing of all information and power into very small elements. And those people simply can't do all the work that needs to be done. Our chief of staff is brilliant, but he's doing the work of 20 people. If you disseminate that work out more, then your projects will actually get completed sometimes, and you'll see a more highly functioning union where you won't think that flight FCTs are not cared for, or DOD. You'll see across the board that we care for all of the bargaining units that we cover, and we actually provide them with tangible outcomes.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Okay, Joey Zobel says, piggybacking off the FCT pay issues, if elected, would you support working with OPM to update the pay scales and facility classification standards that affect DoD employees?
Yeah, I think Jamal was just covering it exactly where he was going from there. There's no level of compensation, we'll say, in its total package that has risen to the level where we don't see it needing to elevate and change for more. It's not just us going out and saying we need more because we're here. We have to actually be able to produce the results, and you all do that on a daily basis. We have to go out and show the changing of recruitment, especially, and it doesn't matter. We've said this at FAA, in all the FAA calls as well. It's about recruitment and retention. I've seen the FCTs. There isn't a recruitment and retention right now. It is they're out screaming for bodies and applicants quite often, or mired in business concepts. So yes, the career field, and especially in DOD as well, we have controllers that are saying they're going to go over, FAA controllers saying they're going to go DOD. Well, those jobs are going to fill up as well, and the compensation is going to, stifle out there, and then we'll see it move back another direction. So ultimately, we have to keep pushing on all these fronts. Jamal and I will never just say we can promise everybody gets more money. We can promise is the work and efforts to ensure that the air traffic control profession is respected and the wages are commensurate with the tasks that we do on a daily basis.
And one thing that Joey just said is that was important there at the end is the classification of the facilities. Going back to prior to us being on the AT pay scale, the GS pay scale, which is what you all are on in the DoD, the agency sets the level. So if you're a GS 12, completely determined by the FAA. For those that we represent, there are opportunities to try to look at that to see, do we transition to a complexity model that identifies what facilities are. But before we tie ourselves to that, we want to see, would it have a negative effect on any of the facilities that are currently where they are. So again, Joey, seeing you, identifying you as someone as sharp, as putting together work groups, and everyone hates to hear, oh, we'll put together a work group for that. Foundationally, having a work group with a start and end date that says we're going to look into this and then provide an answer. The answer could very well be no, we can't do that. But people deserve answers, not just being pushed off into perpetuity.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Joey. Okay, another one from William. He says, and I'll try to keep the flow here because it's a little lengthy. So, do you guys have a plan to fight for more health and welfare money from RVA? Currently, we only receive the minimum. The weather observers, which is a federal contract within the FAA, receive about $7.80 an hour, and they only receive, they being RVA, $4.98. Why does NACA continuously negotiate the minimum amount? Their contract specifically calls for it to be negotiated annually, and his commentary is it's not a negotiation if we're always only getting the minimum set by DOL.
I'll start with saying that when we have seen this evolution take place, I would say that RVA was in a world of compensation maybe 3-4 years ago, and likely to open a contract again, and it was going to be addressed and moved into there. But this should be and could be an actual time. Again, I don't want to go out raising promises for everyone, but that's an exact moment where if they're not going to negotiate with us any further and we're having to file ULPs, like, okay, that's another place for us to then put our heels down or a line in the sand and saying, this is something that isn't acceptable for us anymore. Because you, the company, have refused to bargain with us, this is something we're going to have to ultimately push on. And bringing that information forward of how much the cost has gone up, especially in healthcare and the different packages that are out there. Haltom absolutely proves that point. But what we don't have is this level of communication or this level of engagement. And while it's maybe been screamed or shouted in the past, that's part of the problem with having leadership that's not running towards issues and waiting for somebody to just be, loud enough from here. That's also the beauty of an election. It pushes the conversation. It pushes these opportunities. And I think that's an opportunity that we can push on as a union. And if we don't, we absolutely should be able to, Jamal and I should be able to stand in front of you and say, this is why we made a choice, do it this way, and this is our strategic approach to it. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. But it should never be just accepting it because that's what we've done in the past.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, William. Great questions tonight. Okay, one from David Spinelli. I hope I'm saying that right, David. RVA as a company promotes that they have a match for our 401k. The truth is they're using our health and welfare to match our 401k and promoting that they are matching our retirement. This does not seem legal or right. Is this something you would really be interested in addressing? We received lip service from a past regional president for years that only told us what we wanted to hear, then did nothing. How will you guys be different?
Well, I think number one, I'll take this, Jamal, unless I had some recent information on this. William Russell and I were conversing the other day, and I don't know what company they were specifically speaking to, but this has been a long known issue and has been pushed and worked for years, is that RVA is now going to be held accountable, and they just changed their payout schedule for the health and welfare for this very reason. So that way they couldn't hold it back. And like you said, it just had never been called out. It was a little unknown secret. I don't know the history on it. However, they are now going to have to start paying it on a new pay schedule where they don't get to just sit back and hold that money from you. So if you're with RVA, you should see that. If that's not happening in Serco and Midwest, it's absolutely something we need to tackle as well. And it's also looking at the three companies and figuring out where have we made gains because I know in Serco and Midwest or in some of the different contracts, there are areas that we've expanded on exactly in the regard that we're talking about right now. So we need to look at that and then set that as a standard for our next negotiation. Obviously, all companies are not made equal, and we'll have to fight the fights. But we also need to share the collective successes. Because when we make a move forward, we need to say we were able to do this over here. This should be our new standard, and what we should push for in the future with this company.
Thanks, David. Appreciate that. And then one more from the chat. It looks like when we were talking about not just questions, but ideas, Dennis Hayes says a push for a cost of living allowance or locality similar to the FAA would be great. Key West, and I'm sure others have similar issues. So wanted to make sure we captured that.
Thank you.
Okay. And then Mike H says also Dothan, that tied my tongue, has been one controller down since the beginning of for the February 1st. The company hired a controller that resigned from Memphis Tower. The problem is the FAA has been holding up the process going on 9 weeks now. He was actively controlling traffic at Memphis. Why waste taxpayer money and slow down the hiring process with the background check again?
Yeah, that's outside of our purview as a union, because as it relates to, there are some subjects of bargaining that are exclusive to the management or the agency, and that security is one of those. So we don't have the ability to negotiate the security process. What we do is have the ability to reach out and make calls and say, this is impeding the process. Do you know the individual that is over this particular jurisdiction? And perhaps it's on a desk that we don't even know. So what we'd ask is maybe offline, reach out to one of us or someone on our team, send us a DM or a private message with the name and issue, and we can go through the channels that we have to try to get that addressed. And that's non-partisan. That's not looking out for. It has nothing to do with this election. That's just what we should be willing to do as union reps.
And Bernie wanted to say in the chat, thank you for the time tonight. You're welcome, Bernie. That's why we're here, brother. Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands up, and I'm not seeing anything in the chat right now. I'll make a last call for questions, and I just wanted to highlight that we've posted here in the chat. All of you have hopefully gotten something from the interaction. But there's other places you can go get information about who Nick and Jamal are as candidates, and we've posted them there. Please start with our website. Not just for yourself, but drive others there in your facilities who have questions. And then, of course, we have our social media accounts there where people can certainly keep up to date with things. It's not just about likes and posts. And as I was reading that, we got another question in the chat from John Bonner. It looks like it's a clarification. To clarify the question regarding RVA 401 contributions, RVA claims they match up to 6% of our 401k contributions, when in reality that match is made out of our health and welfare monies. So I think that's just something for us.
Yeah, it's definitely something for us to continue looking into and trying to put all this puzzle together of where all these different, monies are being kept, and having to have a private company open their books actually takes them most often to have to want to state that they'll declare bankruptcy if some type of determination is made against them. That was one of the things that we had talked about when we were having to, fix our last issues, is would the company go out and say that they're bankrupt, and then we had a chance to look in their books from there. But it doesn't mean that we can't, always state in our position, ask questions, or make them prove why they can't, even if we don't get to see exactly what they're doing behind closed doors in their board meetings and everything else. So it's a great point, and especially if you're seeing that, I'm sure that's happening elsewhere, and it's known and out there, and something for us to explore for sure.
Yes, thank you, John. Okay, we've got another one that just showed up. It's from Andrew Fowler. If this has already been addressed, I'm sorry I joined late. That's okay, Andrew. With the FAA reauthorization passed and now signed into law, how would you handle the CBA's wage section, when the DOL officially does wage reevaluation? Each company CBA has different renewal dates.
Renewal dates of when the DOL wage has to be met or exceeded, or renewal dates of their collective bargaining agreements? Well, let's answer the first part. Similar to how we did previously, is use our legislative strength to influence the DOL, the Department of Labor, as they do make that wage determination. Make it very clear that we believe that the air traffic controller pay, no matter where they are, needs to be something that's commensurate with the duties that we do. If you want to recruit and retain the best and brightest, I mean, look, when federal minimum or the state minimum wage in California is $20, that's awesome. And never do we want to deter from everyone in labor needs to be able to take care of their families. But an air traffic controller is tremendously different in responsibility and service to a community and country than one that works at an entry level job. So that wage does need to be raised so that you continue to get the right people to take the positions, keep the prestige associated with the profession. And as we said, a high tide rises all ships. That's only just is going to push all of our wages up. So we put our legislative strength behind that, make it an emphasis point, and get that DOL determination to reflect the profession.
And one of the things that I'll end with there is you don't have to wait till a CBA to start on those efforts, as Jamal was just saying. You start that now so that the way we can capitalize at the time of a term negotiation, or utilize that and determine, is there a midterm negotiation warranted, and do we think that we can make a chance at moving it now if we have enough data or enough support for it?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. And he did clarify that he was referring to the negotiating dates of the CBA. Awesome. Okay, I will mention real quick before I throw it to Nick and Jamal to close it out that we've also posted a volunteer form that we have. Obviously, ballots go out. We started at the beginning by saying on June 3rd, so that's next week. It's imperative that everybody gets off the sidelines and uses their voice in this election, because it's going to determine a lot about the future of NACA. If you'd like to help get out the vote and encourage other people at your facility, please don't hesitate to click on the form. Give us your contact information, and someone from the campaign will reach out to you and tell you exactly how to do that. I will say for this group, I'm so impressed with the amount of energy that came from the start of the town hall and carried all the way through the end. We had amazing questions in the chat, as well as a lot of ideas that I know our team has captured. I'd like to thank you for that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nick and Jamal to close us out.
Jamal, you want to go first, brother?
Oh, sure. I would say, and I'll be brief in the closeout. As I've stated plenty of times through this, I got my non-military start in air traffic control in the FCT, and the crash course in air traffic, transitioning from the structure of the military to working with retired military controllers and guys that passed the craft down to me is something that always sticks with me. Having only a month to certify and determine whether or not I was going to be able to keep this dream alive of being a certified professional controller in the FAA was something that I'll never forget and invaluable to my life, and it helps to chart forward as I see an opportunity to improve the working conditions, benefits, and circumstances under which FCT controllers work. It's never been lost on me. It never will. I will tell you, I was a union member at both. One was PATCO Inc., not original PATCO, but another, and another was NACA. And I too felt, what is the union at that time? I don't want FCT controllers to feel that way, be it if you're retired out of the FAA or you've never worked in the FAA. Want to make it crystal clear that you have a union and your union stands for you. So thanks again for your time, and please consider, when it comes time to cast a ballot, casting them for myself and Nick.
Yeah, and you've seen our style. This is it. Easy questions, hard questions, things that we don't know. We're not here to lie to you. We're not here to just say we promise you everything and all the monies and all the dreams. What we promise is hard work. What we promise is to be a student. And that's part of leadership, right? Is to continue the evolution of learning. I went to my son's graduation this week, and I thought it was, quite beautifully said to all of them is, while you're done being a high school student, now you continue to be a student of life, and we need to be students at all times, and whether we're elected or not. Just because Jamal and I are president, executive vice president, doesn't mean we're the haver of all good ideas. It means that we need to continue finding our areas that we can improve and our areas of weakness to bring them up to a standard that now sets and paves the future for all of us. That's clear. We have facilities that are out there that have 10 and 15 controllers, and that makes it easier to have a voice. When you have a group of individuals like-minded as a union pushing rights, but many of you are in 2 and 3 person or sometimes 1 member facilities. We need to figure out and we need to work on how do we collectively use our voice, and how do you feel supported at the local level every day, and that you have the resources you need to feel like a true member of this union, and that we have the dialogue and communication that's necessary to move us forward. So Jamal and I don't claim everything is perfect and just elect us to continue perfection. What we're actually saying is the opposite. We don't think we're going in the right direction, and these are areas that we need to work on, and we look forward to working on them with you. So with that being said, I think Aaron hit the last point. Don't be silent. You want to be heard? Use this opportunity, use your voice, cast a ballot, and let's work together to move this union forward. We appreciate your time, and thank you. We hope you have a great rest of your evening. Again, thank you for the engagement.
Good night, everybody. Ballots need to be received by July 30th.